I was telling people what I was doing this morning, saying I'm talking about creating hope with regional sustainability, and the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the university said, "Oh, it sounds like you're going to a church service." Well, it's like that actually these days. We are needing hope, aren't we? And it just sounds a little bit like we should have a round of songs together and do a bit of hoopla together. But I have found that these days, this is what I mostly talk about hope. It's no longer any use to just constantly list the problems and the despair, oh, we can't do it. People really need a sense of what they can do and examples of where it's been happening. So I want to run through some of that because of the involvements that I have, in particular the global agenda which we fit into, and it is essentially about an IPCC. I'm on the IPCC and been there for about 10 years, but this idea of going over here and down this side instead of going up, and at the same time the Sustainable Development Goals. And the world has signed up for this. Every country in the world has signed up. But how do you do it is the big question. That's where the hope is needed. And of course, COVID. The world fell apart and we had a year, well, not that unusual for us. I'm not abnormal, but we were very lucky. And mostly we've watched the world as it's been dying, and America especially, but also in Europe. But what I want to just start with is a context that when we have economic collapses, they are an opportunity that has always been a feature of industrial societies since the 1780s, that you go up and then you go down, and in these down points, that's when the innovation comes through. It's like innovation sitting there ready to go, and then you need a collapse to enable it to happen. And that's what I want to briefly talk about and say how we've moved through this era where steam trains came out of this break. This was the 1840s with the Dickens hard times. And this was the 1890s when so many people came to Western Australia because there was gold here, and everywhere else in the world had this terrible depression. Out of that has come the electricity, and electric trains and trams and chemicals, internal combustion engines. 1930s, of course, we know well, but out of that came the era we've basically been in, with cars and trucks and planes and all of the world of space and aviation and electronics. We had a small blip, which was with the GFC, and out of that's really come the superhighway knowledge economy. And now we've got another opportunity. What's going to come out of this? And we've had all these innovations waiting to go. And what I see is a new set of innovations which are now rapidly mainstreaming, accelerating. And they are essentially these four things which are happening very quickly, and a whole series of others that are helping but not quite as rapidly as these. Renewables, batteries, electromobility and smart city systems. And they all fit together. And they are changing our cities and regions and economies. So just a quick bit of evidence, because people say, oh, renewables, they'll happen maybe one day, but look at this. This is the additions of energy to the world's electricity systems. And, PVs has won. Solar has won. It's just dramatically, it is now said to be the cheapest form of power in history. There has never been anything as cheap as solar. Wind has been up there, but not as dramatic. Gas turbines plateaued, coal, Don't invest in coal, Barney. And hydro, there's not much, and the rest you can raffle. They're really, you know, people talk about nuclear and so on, it's over. This is winning. So, and how come? Look at this. This is the price of solar. Way down here now. And wind pretty much the same. What are the most expensive ones? Peaking gas. We're going to have a gas-related, recovery? No. It's so expensive. Nuclear. So, really, that's over. And it accelerated during COVID. This is an example. In the US, power went up with renewables and down with coal, dramatically. And that was the same in every OECD country, including Australia. Why? Because when there's a drop in demand, which is what collapses are all about, everything drops, then the power system goes to the fuel that is the cheapest in terms of its ongoing costs. And of course, solar and wind are free. You've got to buy the coal to keep that going, or the gas. So it's extraordinary change. Now, this is hopeful, isn't it? Yeah. This is amazing. This is stuff that we thought maybe might happen out in the future. It's happening. And people need to know that we're actually winning on these big issues. Electromobility is the next thing. Well, electric cars, I couldn't possibly buy one, and they're out there. They're going to happen maybe one day. One day is next year now. It looks like the price of electric vehicles will cross over and be cheaper than diesel and gasoline-based cars in 1 year. And then it keeps going down. So at this point here, there's no question. You don't have to sort of say, oh, I'll buy an electric vehicle because it's good, wave your green flag. That era is ending very quickly. And it's going to be something that you can again see. It's all due to the cost of batteries. See, the cost of batteries up here are $1,000 per, kilowatt, something like that. Anyway, it's down 200, 150 down here. It keeps halving. So, it's clearly going to be a big thing. The other issue is about, the grid. We're always going to need fossil fuels to help back up the grid because renewables come and go, don't they? There's no solar at night and the wind comes and goes. So you need backup. Well, you do need backup, but there are ways of doing it now with batteries. This is the new Tesla 150 megawatt battery in South Australia. They brought that in, with their own cost, and Tesla said, if we can't build that in 100 days, we'll give it to you for free. And they built it in 60 or something. And it's paid for itself in 2 years. How come? Because batteries respond to the grid within seconds. So if the grid's going up and down, as you have to manage, the power storage in the battery is ideal. So the whole system gravitated to the battery because if you want to turn on gas turbines, they take 6 seconds, and the less than a second one will always win. So they're better. So why do we need gas at all? We don't. And the reality is this system will slowly take over. And the utilities are now saying that. They know how to make a profit, and that's what's going to be happening. Now, the interesting thing, Zach Kirkup has certainly stirred up the Liberal Party in this election with this incredible announcement that came about renewables. Suddenly, I didn't know much about it, but one thing he said was, we're going to build a big solar farm and wind farm up here, and we're going to bring it down this way, and there'll be huge batteries down here, and similar linkage out to Collie. This is one approach, but the interesting thing is that in many ways we've got a different approach in Western Australia that's been emerging, not planned. It's sort of, we've stumbled into it because so many people bought solar on their rooftops, especially down here. It was about 50% of households in this region. It's over a third now across the whole of the city. But when you buy solar and it keeps rising up in growth, eventually the grid starts changing, and they realise that they need to adjust to it. It's no longer a little thing, it's actually taking over. There was a period there in one day where the whole system was run on the PVs on rooftops. It's growing very quickly. So it's called distributed energy rather than big scale, centralised power systems. And in the east, they mostly build these great big solar farms and wind farms. We've just done it on rooftops. And if you put it on a rooftop, that's used right where it's made. So the engineers call it distributed power. And we've got a distributed energy roadmap, which is quietly working its way into the system. And we write about this around the world. People say, oh, well, I don't believe you because it hasn't happened yet in anywhere else, so how can it have happened in Perth? Well, possible, we could be doing something innovative, isn't it? Oh, not really, I mean, they can't admit to that. But we are, and so in reality, 33% is 1,200 megawatts, and in an 8-year period. That's the largest power station in Western Australia, if you want to aggregate it, which you don't because it's all spread out. And it's mostly in the outer suburbs. There's smaller houses in here, and they are slowly doing it, but mostly it's been in the outer suburbs. Now the Minister for Energy, when he began to see it, he said, look, it's going to rise to 70%, it's inevitable, we're going to have to ride with this. So it's a great story that we are actually leading the world on this kind of transition. And we should be proud of it because we can show people how to do it without building massive farms and so on. Now it'll be different for industry. You're going to need bigger scale for industry. So I'm not saying I'm against solar farms and things, but this is the main story. So a place like Josh Burns' house, if you go to joshshouse.com.au, and he gets millions of viewers on this site, he's designed a house which is meant to be energy positive. He makes more renewable energy than he consumes. And that's what has happened there. He's got PVs, he's got his battery, and he's got an electric vehicle, and it's all integrated. And he actually is essentially able to say, well, I'm giving back more than I'm taking from the grid. And if you get that sort of system spread right across the system, well, it can work. And you can see now the technology's there, and it's not that expensive. But what about medium density? I mean, not everybody lives in their own house and can afford to do what Josh did. Mind you, it paid for itself in 6 years, the whole thing, so you're sort of free by then. This is White Gum Valley, where there's medium density development by Development WA, Landcorp. And this one is Shack. This is sustainable housing for artists and creatives. For artists. And they've got a development in here, and they share the solar on that rooftop, and each of these places shares the solar. How do they do that? They do it with a blockchain system. invented by Gemma Green, who then set up her own company, Power Ledger, and she exports all around the world now the expertise developed in that system. So we are, in a way, transitioning quickly because we've got people who are prepared to have a go at it, and a government that's quietly letting it happen. And we've got entrepreneurs like, I forgot his name, but anyway, he's set up Wincliffe Eco Village down near Margaret River, and it's completely able to make more power than it consumes. Solar, batteries, EVs, permaculture. And that's sold out during the COVID time. People were wanting to get out, of course, you know, when they found the spot down there. So that's really taking off. And we've got lots of work happening now in remote settlements, mining, indigenous settlements and so on. They're all using this solar and finding they can do it with small grids. So that's the other side of this. We can do it off the grid as well as in the grid. So some good things happening. And of course, we're providing the world with the battery minerals to have this revolution happen. This is Australia here. This is all the different battery minerals, and we're by far the biggest in that. It's getting bigger. And they're right across our state. Greenbushes is the biggest lithium mine in the world, and you know, I have a lot of trouble explaining to people we're not actually going to run out of battery minerals. There's a lot in Western Australia, and we are going to make them available to you. We're going to have it ethically produced and available. They're even doing blockchain tracing on it so that they can show where it goes through the system right through to recycling. And the other big thing is hydrogen. Now, hydrogen I don't think is ever going to be much in terms of transport. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are going to be always more expensive, but for industry it's big. And we've got all the building blocks for this as well. We've got the sunshine, we've got the battery minerals, we've got iron ore and alumina that need to be processed into metals next to where they're mined. So you have hydrogen created by solar farms out in the regions that create the fuel that is then used to process the minerals. And then you can export green steel, green aluminium, green iron ore even, but all of the things that we do and can add value to can be added using hydrogen. It's not just a fuel, it's also a reducing agent, so you don't need coal and steel making and things like that. So that's all known, but it was sitting. Everyone used to say, why don't we use more hydrogen? Well, we needed a good economic collapse to make it happen. COVID did it for us. And, you know, Andrew Forrest is now going to be the green hydrogen king of the world, and various people are getting behind it. So again, a very good story, something we can say in Western Australia we're doing well. And this was announced this week by Zach. I mean, I never thought it would, in my lifetime, happen, because you've got, you know, this extreme kind of conservatism, keep things as they are, and then you've got others who are saying, but the market is changing. And people like David Honey and so on have seen this coming for some time, and it's essentially saying that, that all of this is happening in Western Australia, and they've been convinced to do it because of industry. Industry have gone to them and said, look, we are ready to go down this track. You need to show that this is the future. So processing of minerals, like Alcoa out the back there and so on, they all are going to switch to using hydrogen. So why? It's not just that the market is there, but they're actually being forced into it because of finance. If you want to get money for any of these projects, you have to show a net zero strategy. You've got to show an explicit board level commitment, lobbying activities consistent with it, and strategies to deliver it, or you don't get your money. So you may have noticed in recent times, all these big companies like BHP and BP and so on, they are doing net zero strategies so they can get their money to do their projects. And net zero is hard because you've got to be able to show every element of your operations will be reducing energy in general, switching to renewables, and anything left will be offset by tree planting. No other offsets, but offsetting is a key part of net zero. And if you go to this website, Climate Action 100+, you'll see hundreds of finance companies across the world that have signed up for this pledge of net zero. It's not carbon. And it's amazing because there's $35 trillion on that site. All of the banks in Australia and the superannuation companies, but companies like BlackRock, who are the biggest finance company in the world, have signed up for this. And so all of these companies have committed reduction, renewables and offsets. Another hope story, right? And it does begin to open up a little bit more about regional sustainability, because you need to purchase offsets as part of this. So every Peel Harvey regeneration project ought to be able to tap into this to get funding, because the big companies out there have to do it. This is the new normal. Pre-COVID you could say, well, there were a lot of people volunteering to do a bit here and there. Now they have to. And it's not because government required it, it's because finance requires it. Finance is a lot more agile than government, right? Certainly the federal government have, you can see how ScoMo has changed from being, we're not getting the targets and things. But net zero by 2050, yeah, I quite like it. And maybe even before. Yeah, so interesting change, and that's because industry and finance are saying, well, we need to do it. So you need to help us. So, of course, there are other ways than planting trees. That's the obvious thing, but a lot of things to do with soil carbon, wetland restoration, they can all be accredited. We've got systems to accredit that, and you guys know more about that than I do. But of course, the multiple benefits are there. You have not just planting and getting carbon credits for it. You are fixing biodiversity, fixing water quality, fixing community engagement in projects that enable them to be proud of their regenerated environment. There's a lot of that you could do lots of hope stories about, I'm sure. But the ones I love, so I talk about these all around the world. I talked about it last week in Winnipeg at a conference about cycling in the snow, which is not exactly what I do, but they wanted to hear some hope, and I told them some of these stories, because the Oil Mallee project is a very good way of fitting in with agriculture, but this one, the Gondola Link project, is extraordinary. And of course, Keith Bradby was part of Peel Harvey way back, and it's extraordinary what he's done. It's regenerating a whole region, a 1,000 kilometre stretch. It's along a songline, I've discovered. And it's using offsets from big companies, and they've been doing this for a while. They've been getting a lot of their money, goes through Greening Australia and so on. And it's a big scale project, but lots of small scale parts to it. And so it started in the early 2000s. I got got him his first job in government because we found him out in the bush, wild man down the back of Esperance. He'd run away from the draft because he didn't want to go to Vietnam, and became a botanist because he discovered this amazing bush out in the back there, and he discovered species and named them. He's now an extraordinarily well-educated guy. Left school at 14, and he started Gondola Link. He left the Department of Agriculture where he had a permanent job and said, I want to go and do this. And I said, gee whiz, that's a risk. He said, yeah, well, I don't want any government money. And he has never taken government money because he thinks the community and the private sector are the groups that need to do this. And it's worked. So you can go to their website, it's an amazing website. And this is one of their latest projects. Look at the scale but it's linking together bits that are missing between reserves and then tying them together. And he said it's going to take 3 generations. He said I was wrong. I think we can do it in this generation. It's an amazing, rapid change. Curtin's now got a campus down there, Newman, Bush University, which I think UWA is a part of as well. And it's got an Indigenous component to it. It's a brilliant regenerated farm. And lots of things like this. Fundraising, it's all done on their website, and it's pretty extraordinary. This is one of their prospect pastoral company exercises, which is showing how to regenerate farmland, and one of the great stories there. If you go to the new museum, you'll see a whole series of short films made on the Gondola Link project, and all the schools come and look at them. It's a very good, hopeful story. And this film, if you can access this on the web still, it hasn't been shown in cinemas, but Breathing Life into Butcher, it's an amazing story of Gondola Link and what they've done in the bush. They've even now gone east. The Great Eastern Ranges project, a similar kind of regeneration project there. That's 2 people from Gondola Link have gone to try and set that up there. And Africa's got their version of it. They were inspired by Gondola Link to do this Sahel-oriented Great Green Wall. And that project is happening with all kinds of support. Certainly a lot of government in that one. But there's no reason to be despairing and fearful for the future when you see these projects emerging. And I see a great deal of hope in regional sustainability. So I think the future is that we have had cities and their regions exploited over many decades. We've been through a period of sustainability. We're beginning to win, and now we're rushing down into a regenerative phase. We are cleaning up the past. We're not just doing less impact, we're doing more and more regeneration. And that to me is what we can see now, and it's accelerated through COVID. So you can see why I talk about hope a lot. Thank you.
Wow.